Welcome, everyone. I want to take this time to welcome you all to our first of two panel discussions. I'm Corey Garriga, a community organizer with the Latino Action Network Foundation. Today's panel discussion is focused on congressional redistricting in the state of New Jersey and how that impacts the Latino communities. Today's discussion will be 1 hour long, and we will discuss the redistricting process, who's involved, what are some of the challenges communities face, and how community members could get involved. I'd like to introduce two of our panelists at this time, Christian Estevez and Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina. Christian was born and raised in Plainfield, New Jersey. He has a strong record of community leadership in the state and local levels. Christian is the son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic. He understands the struggles of working families trying to provide a better future for their children. Christian earned his bachelor's degree from Rutgers University, where he studied labor relations and Latino studies. He was an adjunct professor at Rutgers University, where he taught a course on Latino workers in the United States. He has a successful career in the labor movement and is currently the president of the Latino Action Network. And Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina is a visionary leader and educator with the field research, policy, legislative, and program development background. She has a record of applied experience of the development of strategic union organizing, electoral and worker justice community campaigns. Currently, she is the executive director of the Worker Institute, ILR, Cornell University, where she oversees the successful management of the Institute's vision and mission to advance collective bargaining, workers' rights, economic and racial justice via research, and education on contemporary labor and workplace issues to generate innovative thinking and policy solutions to problems related to the work, economy, and society. Dr. Campos-Medina is considered a policy expert on workplace and labor issues, women's rights, voting rights, immigrant worker justice, immigration policy, and U.S. trade relations. She is a board member of POTUR-PAC, a national political action committee advancing women representation in the U.S. Congress, and the current PAC chair for NJ Citizen Action, an organization advancing policy reform for working families. She currently serves as the advisory committee member for Elección Latina, Ready to Run, a program of the Center for American Women in Politics, and is a visiting fellow at the Eagleton Institute, Rutgers University, New Brunswick. As well as Dr. Campos-Medina has received countless accolades in New Jersey's most influential political leaders by several publications, ROI-NJ, Insider-NJ, Politicker, as well as Observer. She's the host and executive producer of Activista Rise Up, a forum for activists to engage everyday people on the work of promoting social and economic justice. You can follow Dr. Campos-Medina on social media at Dr. Campos-Medina. And at this time, we're going to go forward and begin our discussion. With that said, I'd like to tailor our first question to Christian and Patricia. Christian, if you could go first and just explain what the full process of redistricting involves.
Would you like me to start?
Yes.
Okay. So, redistricting is the term that's used for congressional apportionment, meaning that it's the way that states draw maps for how the members of Congress are going to represent communities. And so the way it works is that there's a certain amount of people in the country that's divided equally so that every congressional district has the same number of people in it, so that every representative in Congress, because they're representing the same number of people, the voice of each voter, right, is counted equally. So you and I, even if we live in different districts, you don't have more voting power than I do. So it's about one person, one vote. And so in New Jersey, because of the population, we have 12 congressional districts, and the state has to be divided just basically equally 12 times, down to a person, down to like one person. You could, have a little bit more deviation than that, but the standard is that you want to try to get as close to exact evenness as possible. So that becomes a challenge always, because you don't want to just take the state and draw it into a grid that just has an equal amount of people, because you want to try to keep people together who have what we call a community of interests. A community of interest meaning that the people that are in the district share some commonalities, whether that be race or ethnicity or industry, whether it be farming or industrial. So you try to keep like people together so that when their representatives in Congress, can kind of, be the voice of whole communities, and you're not splitting communities out so that they become tiny pieces of each district, and therefore their concerns aren't being heard, right? So this isn't just an artificial thing. This is about saying, look, if you took the farming community and you split them up into 12 different districts, and now they're each 2% of each district, right? Then their concerns as a farming community is not really going to be heard because they're drowned out by everybody else. So if you keep them all kind of together, or as much as possible, then their representatives will be more likely to really hear them and see them, right? And so the same thing applies to cultural and ethnic and racial groups, where you don't want to be split out so much that you disappear, right? But at the same time, you don't want to be packed together so much that you're all crowded into one district, because then, now you only have one representative who can speak to your issue as opposed to several, right? So we're always like looking out for around this concept about being either packed into districts too much or cracked, meaning that we're split out too much. And we're looking always, and when we're looking at redistricting, is getting that number generally right, right sized. And so that's been the challenge that we've had during congressional redistricting, and we'll have during state redistricting, which is finding that right size, not packing us in too much in one place, so that we have influence, as much influence as we can have as a Latino community in as many districts as we can. And so that's what we've been doing during this process.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. Dr. Campos-Medina, you go over with us as well. What is the full process of redistricting involved? Your points of view as well, please.
Yes, thank you, Corey, for all the work you have been doing on behalf of the Latino Action Network Foundation, and educating and doing outreach on how important this process is. And my name is, Patricia Campos-Medina, and thank you for that introduction. And I'm here speaking on behalf of Latina Civic Action, which is a statewide organization representing the interests of Latina women, and trying to figure out how to advocate and build power for a Latino community by elevating the voices of Latina women and helping them run for office and advocate for office. So for us, the process of redistricting is key, because as Chris explained, it's about who gets to vote in every election and chooses their representatives in government. So this process is critical in terms of defining political influence and political power to demand resources for our communities, for our children, for our families. So that's why for us this is critical. And also because it determines who runs for office, who has the opportunity to represent the communities where they live. So that's how we at Latina Civic are interested in engaging this process, and in partnership with the Latino Action Network to elevate the voices of the Latino community. Now, the redistricting process by the United States Constitution has to be done after each census count, which is part of our constitution as well. So it builds up from the census. That's why a year ago, 2 years ago, before the pandemic hit us, we were really working hard to make sure that everybody got counted on the census, because we wanted to make sure that we had an accurate count, which leads to the redrawing of the congressional maps and the legislative maps, and it divides how our government gets elected. So it builds up from the census. So we were able to get, and the census just tell us what we know, where our community has grown, how much of it has grown. And what we saw in New Jersey is that our Latino population was about 19%, almost 20. It went up about to 21.6 or 0.9%. So it went a couple of points only, which is, is significant. But the big change that we saw is the spread of the Latino community. We didn't just grow in one part of the state, which is traditionally thought as a Latino area like Hudson or Passaic. We grew in the middle of the state. We grew everywhere. So that means that we have dispersed. People are not living as packed. Our community is not living as neatly packed together in one area as such. But we're still a big percentage of the population in some of the northern districts. So it began with the counting of the population, and then the process of the count of analyzing the data that gets sent by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to the state to draw the maps. That is set by each state has their own law as to how they analyze the data and how do they change the lines of the district. Because one important process for the redistricting is that the districts cannot stay stagnant because people move. People move from one city to the next city. A city, an area that might have been majority Black might now be more Latinos. In the case of a place like Trenton, we see a population growth of Latinos in the Mercer County. So that changed. So the district has to change. But who gets to decide that? How the line changed in New Jersey is done by a commission. And that commission is appointed, it's a political appointed commission. There's different ways in different states. Some states have independent commissions in which citizens participate and citizens offer a map. Some states have legislative commission in which the different legislative representatives choose a map. In New Jersey, we have a political appointed commission in which representatives from the Democratic Party and representatives from the Republican Party appoint 5 commissioners to sit and actually look at the data and look what the changes have been in the district and offer a map. There is a tiebreaker, and it's usually a member of the judicial. In this case, in New Jersey, was Judge Wallace, who gets to evaluate the submissions. The Republicans everybody gets the same data. We get the same data, and Latino Action Network Foundation actually got the data. And they get to offer, the Republicans, commissioners get to offer their own map. The Democrats get to offer their own map. And we were hoping in New Jersey that the citizens were able to offer our own map, and we actually offer it, but they didn't. They're not obligated to take a look at it, right? So that happened. We were also, as part of our advocacy, we were also demanding for a period in which citizens could comment on the maps that were offered. However, we were not afforded that opportunity in New Jersey, and the maps that were offered by the Republican and the Republican and Democratic Commission was submitted to the commission, and Judge Wallace did rule in favor of the Democratic map without any input from the public. So I'll stop there because that's sort of the process of how it went. And I think that it's important to understand the process and then figure out what's the input from citizens like us and groups like us who actually have a mandate. I mean, I feel like for Latina Civic Action, our mandate is to make sure that we create opportunities for our community to be represented politically, that is fair, and that it allows opportunity of our community is a community of interest, like as Chris explained, that we have an input on that process. And so far, we haven't had that input. I think that Judge Wallace sided with the Democratic vote. I mean, I think that, you know, we could do much better with at least a process in which citizen groups have a say on or give feedback on the map before it gets adopted. But it was adopted. It's being challenged in court by the Republicans because they felt that the reasons Judge Wallace gave them for adopting it were incomplete or not appropriate. So they're challenging his vote, but I don't think that the vote is going to change. So I'll stop there because that's the process part. Then we can talk more about what is it that we can do and what does the map look like and what we can do now to have a say on how we move forward and the impact that it has on the legislative map.
Okay, so I do have a question on that, what you just mentioned, and I'm just going to direct it to Christian real fast. What are some challenges that the Latino community has been facing because of past redistricting efforts?
You know, I think the struggle that we've been having is, and I think Patricia, Dr. Campos-Medina, talked about this in terms of representation. Right, in terms of Latino underrepresentation in government, both elected and in terms of employment, right? And this is something that we're constantly struggling with. And so when you look at the number of Latinos in the state, right, we make up 22% of the population, yet we have one congressperson, Latino congressperson, right? We should have at least 2 out of 12, right? To be closer to be proportional, right? And so the challenge for us has been it's two-part. One is to draw districts that make that reality more possible, right? And then there's a political part of it, which is you can draw districts that are more that put more Latinos in so that you have an opportunity, but then you have to go through the political process and get your person selected. So there's challenges and opportunities here. I think that when we get to the part where we talk about what the map actually came out to be, I can talk more about, you know, what the opportunities are and what we need to do politically to get there. You're on mute.
Right. I want to thank you both for those explanations. I just want to take this opportunity to introduce our third panelist, Alex Fonseca. Alex is currently in his last semester at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. He is majoring in political science and Spanish language. Alex is currently an intern at Eagleton Institute of Politics. He is a map drawer for redistricting at the Latino Action Network Foundation, and he plans to combine his fluency in Spanish with his experience in policy, politics, and mapping software to represent Latino communities across New Jersey. So, Alex, what is the difference between a majority-minority district and a white majority district?
So, a minority-majority district is pretty much a district in which a racial minority group or groups, right, constitute as the majority of the district's total population. And I would say the key words there are group or groups, because one particular racial minority group doesn't have to make up necessarily 50% of the district's total population, right? So rather it can just be several racial minority groups that together compile over that 50% threshold. So there are several, there's right now the current map, which I'm about to share with you guys right now. It is right over here. Can you guys all see? Perfect. So, you know, a minority majority district, as I said before, is when a group or groups of racial minority groups make up more than 50% of the total population. And right now in this map, we have 5. And I'll talk more about the specific ones later. But also Latino influence district, which we currently have 2 of those, is when the Latino percent population is over 50%, right? So for example, in District 6, in Congressional District 6, it is 42% white, 25% Hispanic, 19% Asian, and 10% Black, right? So the percent white is 42%, and the minority percentage is 54%. So that would be an example of a minority majority district with white influence, because it's the largest demographic group in the district, even though it doesn't necessarily hit 50%. District 8, which is our largest Latino influence district. That includes communities such as North Bergen, Union City, West New York, Elizabeth, Bayonne, Hoboken, parts of Jersey City, Harrison, and as I said before, that is our largest Latino influence district, right? So that district is 51% Hispanic, it's 25% white, 12% Asian, and 8% Black. So since the Hispanic percentage in the district is the highest, it would be a Latino influence district, meaning that Latinos have the most influence in that district. Additionally, Congressional Districts 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, Latinos make up the second largest racial minority groups by percent population, which is 8 out of the 12 current districts, 7 of which Latinos make up the largest minority group, right? So in 8 of those districts, Latinos make up the second highest demographic group by percent population. And as I said before, 7 of those, they are the largest minority group. So that answers the question about representation and how Latinos are represented in this current map. Additionally, 2, as I mentioned before, 2 of those districts, which are Congressional District 8 and Congressional District 9, are Latino influence districts. The Congressional District 8 is at 51% Hispanic, as I mentioned before, and Congressional District 9, which includes Patterson and Passaic, that one is at 42% Latino influence. So basically 10 out of the 12 existing districts in this map that just got voted on by the commission, 10 of 12 of those Latinos are either have an influence district, or they make up the second largest demographic group by percent population. So in 10 of the 12 districts, Latinos are represented to a certain extent, and 2 of those, they have the most influence, which, as I said before, is District 8 and District 9.
Okay, thank you, Alex, for that explanation. And how does this translate into congressional influence and power? This question is directed to Christian.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really important for Latino power. And that's why when we started this process, we joined with several other organizations and a coalition to create, a racial equity map that would maximize the power of people of color, right, and racial minorities in the state. And so we set out to have as many minority and majority districts as possible, meaning that minorities, people of color, outnumbered whites in those districts. And the goal we set out for was 6 of the 12, right? We did fall short. We ended up in the map with 5 of them. So we didn't quite hit our goal, but the fact that we did come out with 5, I think, is something of a victory. The reality is that the map, the way that the population has grown, especially amongst the Latino and Asian community, the current map that we're sitting in today, at least 5 of those districts are, or 5 of those districts are majority minority as it is. And in the redrawing, our goal was to at least make sure that that was reflected in the new map and try to get some improvement on it by getting to 6, which we thought we can get to. and we wanted to make sure we pushed back against any efforts to do gerrymandering in a way that would split us so that we would go backwards, where we'd end up with less than 5, which is possible. Weirdly enough, it's, you know, if people get creative enough, they could find ways to minimize our power. So in the sense that we as a coalition presented a map to the commission showing that we can get to 6, even if they didn't exactly follow our lead and go to 6 as well, was important. When you look at the map that we presented, the racial equity map, and what the Democrats ended up proposing, which is the map that ended up winning, they're very similar in many ways. So we do think that we had an influence on the process. We think the process was still flawed. We think that if we had an opportunity to have more dialogue back and forth with the commission, that we could have probably gotten to the 6th majority minority district. We think that we could have improved what the other districts look like and given our communities more power. But I don't want to come out of this saying that, you know, this map is a complete disaster, because, you know, we did accomplish a lot in it. And one of the things that we want to point out is that, you know, we kept District 8, which is our traditional Latino majority district. We kept it a Latino majority district. Technically speaking, they didn't maximize it. So the Latino voting age population was slightly under 50%, which we felt was unnecessary. They could have, if they had talked to us, we could have shown them, and we did demonstrate to them that we could have gotten there even under Judge Wallace's restrictions or under his guidelines. We could have gotten there and stayed within those guidelines, but because they were not talking to us openly and telling us what the challenges were on their side, we couldn't give them suggestions on how to improve it. But overall, though, you know, I think that we accomplished a lot. And when you look at us keeping District 9, which is the one that Alex described that includes Patterson and Passaic, as 42% Latino, meaning that Latinos are not just the largest minority group, it's the largest group, because the white population is about 37%, I think, right, Alex? Or it's in the 30s. You're on mute, Alex.
Yeah, I'm on mute. I believe it's right here, it's only 27%.
Only 27. So Latinos are clearly the largest group of all groups there. And you have a congressman there who has served for a long time. And it's not any type of insult to say that, he could be at the end, towards the end of his career based on his age, right? Who knows if he wants to retire and spend time on the beach, or does he want to stay in Congress until the very last moment? That's up to him. But we definitely set the stage for if he decides to move on and not run again over the next 10 years, that there's a serious opportunity for Latinos to elect a second congressperson out of the 9th district, right? And when you look at other places as well, you look at the 12th district, that's currently represented by Bonnie Watson Coleman, who, by the way, her district has grown over the last decade to have a lot of Latinos. And she has been very responsive to our community because of that. And it shows why you need to draw these maps these ways. Even if the person who you elect is not Latino, your community has more power when you have better numbers there. And so Bonnie Watson Coleman is someone who has been very attentive to our community. She's participated in several of the Latino Action Network conferences, including live streaming. After she spoke, she did a live stream from our conference a couple of times. So she's someone who really tries to make sure that she's doing things for our community. And again, Bonnie's somebody, if she, for whatever reason, chooses not to continue, right? It's a district where, even though it's a coalition district where all the minorities combined are the majority, right? Latinos are the biggest of the minority groups. So we have a good shot there of putting forward maybe a Latino candidate or Latina candidate in the 12th district, right? So I think that's what I was saying before in terms of like the map creates the opportunities, right? In terms of the numbers, but then you have to create the political opportunities, meaning that you're working with the parties, whether Democrat or Republican or whatever, and making sure that they're developing the pipeline of candidates, right? So Latina Civic comes in on that, where they've the leaders in Latina Civic have a long record of preparing Latinas to run for office, and have done a great job. And you can see it in our state legislative delegation, where so many Latinas are senators or assemblywomen. And so we need to do the same thing for congressional, is make sure that we have people in the pipeline. And I believe because of all the senators and assemblywomen that we have, that in all of these districts, we have people. They can't say that we don't have people who can be Congress people. We have them. They're great legislators at the state level. They would make great legislators at the federal level. So we are playing this on different levels. And I'm not going to say the moment redistricting is over. We were thinking about these opportunities prior to redistricting. We were thinking about this years ago in terms of how you line everything up so that the districts, once they're drawn, now you're pushing for when the opportunity opens up, you're ready to fill those, make Latino candidates available to run for those seats.
Okay. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah.
Dr. Campos-Medina, what are some of the key congressional issues facing Latino communities that we need immediate action and support on?
Oh my God, it's a long list. But we have, with the pandemic, starting from the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, our population, Latinos, is growing. We have the greatest number of school children in our schools. So there's a whole agenda on education, on investment on education that we need federal attention on. There is a need on job creation. There's needs on affordable housing. There's all the needs that we see in our community that are part of the Latino Action Network Foundation agenda, and are things that are impacted by our federal policies, right? Immigration, of course, is one, but that's not the only one. That we need federal action and investment, and that's why having representation that understand the dynamics of that community is key. That's why Congress matters, because they determine how resources get sent to each state in the congressional. So, but I wanna elevate the reason why I think we ended up where we ended up in increases is correct. That we ended up with majority minority districts 5, which is good. We wanted 6, we got 5. But that is reflective of who is voting and who's supporting the Democratic Party, right? Like, and who is participating. So we are active participants politically. So they need us on those districts to make sure that they keep the political levers of power moving into the direction that we are at, specifically the Democratic Party. So I think that we did a good job on keeping our relevance, but they also have a self-interest on keeping those voters in those districts, because that's what they need in order for Democrats to continue building, controlling the congressional delegation. So with that said, that only creates an opportunity for us as a community to have a demand, but then we also have to do our work to be able to be actionable on our demand. And that's part of training candidates and organizing our community to vote and all the other stuff. I want to address the issue of representation, because even though we have 5 minority-majority districts, we have 2 districts where our Latinos have political or to have more political influence. That means we should at least have 2 Congress people. We should have not just 1, and we should be able, to run Latinos in the 5 congressional districts where we have a role. I always tell politicians that we should not just be able to run in District 8, it's like that's our district, it's a Latino seat. We ought to be able to run in 9, we ought to be able to run in every district that Latinos have a percentage of 30 or more. We can represent everybody else. We don't have to just run in Hudson County. And that is the basic of how do we turn the maps and the districts into actual political power to elect people that look like us, to represent us in places that we have political influence. And I think that that's at the core of where the political debate is going to move next, as to who, how do we create the opportunity for the legislators that we already have, who have a career and have a record of legislating for New Jersey, not just for Latinos, to be able to run for office. And we at Latina Civic, we have we have about 8 Latinas in Congress. We have only two Latinos in the legislature, I'm sorry. That's only about 8% political representation for a population that is above 20%. So even the numbers that we have are not enough. And we need to be able to say that if we are 21% of the population, having 8% representation on the legislative map is not acceptable. In the congressional map, we only have, one congressman, one senator Latino. A Latina has never represented New Jersey in Congress. And African American representative for the first time ever when Bunny Watson Coleman ran, and 3 cycles ago, I think. So we have a lot of ground to cover in the next decade to correct that wrong. And one of the goals that Latina Civic has made clear from the beginning of the redistricting process is that this is the decade of the Latina woman, and we are going to work to make sure that a Latina goes to Congress and represents New Jersey in the United States Congress, because we're 51% of the Latino population, and we need one more representation. We cannot settle for just one member of Congress who is Latino, or one senator who is Latino. So I think that we just have to make, I always believe in saying it so that it becomes a reality. So that's our plan for the next decade.
Okay, thank you. Christian, do you have anything you'd like to add to some of the key congressional issues affecting Latino communities that need immediate action and support on?
I mean, listen, I think that I'll say here what I say all the time, right? Every issue is a Latino issue, right? One time I was talking to a legislative leader, and they asked me, what are the key Latino issues? And at the time I said, paid family leave, $15 minimum wage. And they said, no, the Latino issues. I said, if you want, I'll put a sombrero on and dance around in a circle while I say paid family leave at $15 an hour. I go, what do you want me to do here? Like, these issues matter to all working class people, and Latinos are overwhelmingly working class community. And so whenever you're looking at these things, you're looking at Latino issues, right? And in many cases, if not almost all, we're disproportionately negatively impacted by these things. So when you don't raise the minimum wage, Latino families, suffer more, statistically than others, right? When you don't have paid family leave, and we talked about this a lot, where so many women-led families, single parent-led families, that when you don't have paid family leave, so many mothers have to worry about losing their job if they try to stay home and take care of their child, right? And so in New Jersey, because we have such a strong fighting coalition of resistors, we've been able to get some of these things done, but at the federal level, they're not, right? And so, and there's so much more we need to do at state level, but we need to pass a living wage, a real living wage at the federal level. We need to have stronger protections on paid family leave at the federal level that even go beyond what we have in New Jersey, right? So we're not satisfied with what we have. We know we need to do a lot more. And look, right now with the Build Back Better plan, right? It's not tagged as a Latino issue because it's not immigration in and of itself, but there is immigration, related provisions in there. And there's provisions in terms of protections of workers' rights, right? The right to organize. And we know that there's a union difference when Latinos and African Americans and other minorities and women are in a union, there's a union difference, right? Because when you have a labor contract that says you have to pay everybody equally for the same jobs, right? You start to get rid of those the wage discrepancies, right, between men and women or people of color and white men. So the union difference is important. So it's not labeled overall a Latino issue, but the PRO Act provisions of the Build Back Better plan are very important. And I've been talking to our congressional delegation all along about how important it is that they, as they're negotiating the terms of the Build Back Better plan, that they do not lose those pieces, because if they lose them, it's not just a loss for labor unions, it's a loss for the Latino community that needs there to be better labor protection so that more of us can participate, right, in the in the labor movement. And because right now, it's so easy for employers to thwart labor union organizing, right? And the harder it is to organize unions, the longer Latinos will stay in poverty jobs and out of the middle class. So, there's just so much at stake. The Voting Rights Act, right? The Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. These things are important to the Latino community because, our voting rights are under attack. They've been chipping away at the Voting Rights Act, and now with certain parts of the Voting Rights Act taken away, states are attacking people's right to vote. So we need to get these things passed. So everything that's happening right now in Congress is of utmost importance to the Latino community. And that's why we need to elect representatives who are going to go out there and fight for us.
Thank you very much, Christian. So with all of that said, I want to thank our panelists for their time and information and their dedication to ensuring fair districts in New Jersey. Before we officially end, I would like to share with everyone 2 articles which will be, which will be shared with this video link. The first, which was published on NewJerseyGlobe.com, it's titled "New Congressional Maps: Bad Christmas Surprise for Civil Rights," written by Frank Argote Freyer and Christian Estevez. The other article was written by Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina and Laura Matos. It can be found on NJ.com, titled "Latinos are 20% of the state, yet they got 0% representation on New Jersey's redistricting panel." All right, those links to those articles will be shared once the video is released in a link. And lastly, I am going to just share with this video here the flyer. Can everyone see that there? This flyer here gives a list of the remaining public hearing dates for the state legislative public hearings, which our second roundtable will focus on for state legislative apportionment. And if anyone is interested in getting involved in that process, they can reach out to myself or the other community organizer, Carmelo Cintron, via email. So that would be cgriga, CGRIGA, at lanfoundation.org. Carmelo's is CCINTRON at landfoundation.org. I want to thank everyone again for their time and patience, and have a wonderful day.